Hey, New Hope family, it's Pastor Matt with your devotional thought for today. In Proverbs 27, we see the following words written by King Solomon. Iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. This is a verse that's often quoted, and yet I think if we start to consider how iron actually sharpens iron, the process by which iron is sharpened on another piece of iron, we would realize a lot more how our relationships, how we, one person to another person, sharpen one another, and also realizing that it's not easy. This is not an easy process. It takes time and it's painstaking labor to sharpen iron. They'd heat up a billet of iron, some sort of metal that would be hot enough to be pounded into the shape of a blade of some sort. And then the sharpening process would consist of other pieces of metal that would essentially strike that metal. We can sharpen similarly with like a grindstone, a grind wheel, something like that. When we're sharpening blades, that sort of thing, it's still the rubbing and actually the removal of excess things in order to get that sharp edge. It's the iron against the iron that produces that effect. So in order for one iron to sharpen the other iron, in order for them to sharpen one another, there's a removal of the things that are impure, the things that do not work well to cause a nice sharp edge on a blade. And I think in the same way for us, as we look at the way our lives, we can sharpen one another. As we look at the way that happens, it's similar. It's recognizing the ways in which we're falling short, and sometimes we're too blind, if we're honest, to see it in our own lives. And so others come, and they're like a mirror. They hold up our lives to us. And just as iron sharpens iron, so we can sharpen one another. So in the same way that striking iron removes some of the things that prevent that sharpness, that's actually removing of material to create that sharp edge, we help one another remove the things that are godless, remove the things that are not designed by God for our benefit, for our growth, for His glory. And as we encourage one another, as we challenge one another and call one another out, it hurts sometimes. Just as iron removes part of iron, that's going to be a painful process if iron could feel. In the same way for us, when we're being sharpened, when things are being removed that are impurities in our lives that we've depended upon, that we may not realize are preventing us from being as sharp as we would want to be. When that happens, it can be painful, it can be hard, and we may not want to do it because it can be painful on both ends. It's not just the iron that's being sharpened, it's both pieces that are being impacted by this. And in the same way, in our relationships with one another, it's hard when we have hard conversations with each other that are for our benefits. And I think that's the key to remember. These conversations are guided by love and driven by a desire to see sincere and genuine growth for God's glory in the lives of one another. So I think this passage is really powerful and really helpful, a great illustration for us, but recognize that if we are going to sharpen one another as God intends for us to do, there's times where that's going to be incredibly difficult, incredibly challenging and painful, but we need to step into that in order to be able to grow in the ways that our Lord has intended, which, yes, requires one another in our lives. So let's recognize that, see how the Lord has designed us for one another, but also that both of us would mutually be beneficial in those relationships and in those situations.